Jodi Arias was found guilty on Tuesday, and now the jury must decide if she should die for that crime. The jury will have to determine whether Arias killed Travis Alexander in a cruel and heinous manner. The defense will try to humanize Arias, and the process will take several weeks. Arias says she wants to die.
I believe death is the ultimate freedom, so I'd rather just have my freedom as soon as I can get it.
Let's bring in our legal expert and former prosecutor Thomas Glasgow, who's also a defense attorney, depending on who hires you, right? So first of all, let's start off with Arias. Now, they go through the sentencing phase now. This jury has already convicted her. So it seems like, is it possible for them to set aside the fact that, you know, they've probably established how they feel about her and then move to the sentencing phase and really sort of be neutral?
When you go into a death penalty case, since we don't have the death penalty here in Illinois anymore, when you go into a death penalty case, what happens is there's a death penalty phase where you have aggravation and mitigation, and those jurors, before they get there, have to be determined whether or not they believe in the death penalty in order to be on that jury. So jurors, when they go into these sort of cases, guilty and not guilty is one aspect of the case. Actually ending up getting that death penalty verdict requires them to have a unanimous verdict of we think that there are no redeeming qualities to this person that mandates that they be put to death. And that's something where you go through aggravation and mitigation, and it's not so much beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's not the standard there. It's just, is it clear, is it relevant and reliable at that point? The prosecution's going to attempt to paint her as very heinous and look at the stab wounds. He had to look at himself in the mirror as he died, etc. Whereas you look at the person that is putting on the defense case, and that's the mitigation. She was an abused person. She went through all this as a child. This is the things that she ended up growing up with. Here's how we understand how she got to where she is now. She's not worthy of dying.
Do you find juries can separate the two, the actual conviction phase with this phase of sentencing?
Yeah, they do. They understand guilt and innocence, or guilt or not guilty, is different than whether or not they put the person to death or not.
All right. Now let's talk about Ariel Castro, the Cleveland case. I have to tell you, I mean, he's gotten so much coverage. People are blown away by this. Say you're representing him. How do you mount a defense for somebody who clearly people are forming an opinion about, and because he's done this crime that has gotten so much attention?
A case like this is not so much about guilt or not guilt, or whether or not they did it, but it's whether or not you're going to get into that mitigation phase. It's really no different than a death penalty case, because you know that eventually you're going to lose one of the multitude of counts where they have charged him with a sexual crime. And if this were to happen in Illinois, each act of sexual penetration would be a separate count that would have to run consecutively. So this is a decade of these kids' lives that is gone. To put it in perspective, when these kids were taken into, when they were kidnapped, Apple had not even created an iPhone yet. I mean, we were in Iraq in the first Gulf War. That's how long this was that they have been in this hell. So you're not going to end up winning this case. You have to end up sparing the person's life if they end up going for some kind of death penalty phase.
And that is something they're thinking about now, because one of the girls was apparently impregnated, and we're hearing reports that Castro allegedly would punch her and starve her to get her to abort the fetuses, and apparently that did happen. Now, I understand they're trying to look at murder in this. How do you play on that one, or maybe just the death penalty? How does that work?
Well, there's certain aggravating factors, especially in this the state that we're talking about, we're in Cleveland, where the person who commits an aggravated kidnapping, if they commit an aggravated murder or murder during the course of this, it can result in the death penalty. The murder is going to be the definition there. How far along was she in the pregnancy? How long was it that was the fetus viable? Is it something that's within their state code that they end up deeming the person an actual person, the fetus an actual person, for the purposes of the murder statute? And if that were the case, I mean, there's testimony, and he's apparently admitted to some of these issues, that he punched and kicked the person, or the young lady, until she ended up aborting the child. That could be conceived as murder. And if they prove that in conjunction with the kidnapping, then it could warrant the death penalty under several of the aggravating factors that would have and could have come into play in Illinois when we had the death penalty.
That is a fascinating case, and it'll be interesting to see how that affects, right to life issues and you know, conception and when a child is actually a viable life.
It does.
It'll be an interesting case to watch. Just the sheer magnitude of the what they had to go through is mind-boggling.
And people like this, it's difficult for investigators to find them because he had no criminal history. So to track down someone like this, there's no DNA on file, he didn't have a criminal record, he didn't end up having any prints. They weren't looking at him because he had not committed a crime.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Tom. We'll be watching. I'm sure you'll be back to talk about this one for sure. Well, up next, arrested for